Hey everyone, it's Justin with a KTOD exclusive today, building with set 2, this time with Hero Boba Fett leader. So let's jump right in to the content. We've got our Hero Boba Fett unit. Let's talk about his ability for a second. So when you play a unit that has one or more keywords, you may exhaust this leader. If you do, give a friendly unit +1 +0 for this phase. So a couple things with that. One is that it's not an action. You're doing it as you're playing another unit, so you can seamlessly do it. And the other thing that I really, really want to touch upon is just how powerful +1 +0 is. When you think of how good, I'm going to compare a card, and we'll talk a little bit about this card later. The card Red 3. Red 3 grants raid to all of your units. Sure, there's some games where Red 3 goes unchecked and ends up adding one to this unit and one to this unit and one to this unit. But for the most part, in Star Wars Unlimited, you've got maybe one or two units out. And Red 3 is still a powerful card, even if it's able to do +1 on one or two units. You know, adding to attack once or twice per game, it's still a very powerful unit. And oftentimes it's a must kill. So with this Boba ability, as long as you're continuing to play cards with keywords, you're able to add 1 power. This is especially important with the keyword of ambush, because you can trigger that card, that ambush in itself, so granting essentially your ambush cards +1 attack. But just really, really powerful. A lot of the abilities, good synergy with a lot of the abilities, which we'll see later, and just sort of adding up and being in a very aggressive deck that's able to push damage ahead of time. If you compare to some of the other more aggressive leaders, like a Sabine that's pinging both sides, sure, Sabine comes out earlier, but if you're thinking about, hey, was I able to attack for maybe one or two more on a base with Boba, it's a similar type of dynamic where you're able to get a little bit aggressive. So I'm a big fan of this guy. I think he's going to see some play in Premiere and Constructed, so excited to see where he goes. And with this, I decided to sort of break down how I would build this deck turn by turn, which is a process I've used with building a few other decks in the past. So let's jump right in and think about what we want to do on turn 1. So one thing with this deck and sort of what we want to do turn 1 is that we are a beatdown deck. We are trying to, similar to a Sabine, same colors, we're trying to push damage, we're trying to attack, we're trying to get, if we're killing units, we don't want to necessarily trade, we want to be the aggro, we want to be the beatdown. So obviously you've got your very powerful units of Green A-Wing, Green Squadron A-Wing, Battlefield Marine, they both attack for 3. We've got Ketsu, who's the new Saboteur, Sabine, and R2. So the bottom row, along with Battlefield Marine and really all these units, not all of them have the abilities, right? So you're looking at Sabine and Battlefield Marine and R2 don't have the keywords. The A-Wing and Ketsu do have the keywords. Well, this actually matters sort of the least on these items based upon the fact that you're playing your turn 1 unit, you're not necessarily, that trigger Boba Fett on that first turn, you'll do it, but it's going to have the least amount of impact. So, you know, you can play an A-Wing, you'll trigger it, so it's a 2-3 that turn, but it's generally not going to have much of an impact on that turn. And you'd want to do it just in case someone was, you know, ECLing in a Kylo's tie or something like that, but that's a pretty unlikely scenario. So these guys are just strong units in their own right. You've got all 4 of the 5 of them attack for 3, and R2 is just a big aggro card in the sense that he's hard to kill, so he's probably going to get in for a couple. He's going to sort of steal some actions if they want to remove him from the field, and he digs towards some of your more higher payoffs. So I view all 5 of these cards as aggressive plays. The A-Wing and Marine are oftentimes the best ones, but the other ones have sort of high opportunities as well. Like, for instance, Sabine and Ketsu will be really good against the shield. Any shields that you see in play, whether it's a Crafty Smuggler or a Luke deck, and R2 obviously has that sort of more longevity that he provides. So same general concept, turn 1, we are aggressively playing one of these things. We would not keep a hand without a 1-drop. Okay, turn 2, though, is where we really start seeing the synergies of Boba. I mentioned Red 3 before, so unchecked, if you're able to play one of your 2-drops, whether it's an A-Wing or a Battlefield Marine, and it actually lives, and you're able to play a Red 3, you get the +1 from the trigger Red 3, but then you also get the +1 from Boba. So you can theoretically attack for 5 on turn 1, which is just an incredibly powerful aggressive start. And then you've got other cards as well. The Peacekeeper has been, so far in testing, has been really strong as 1/5, but really attacking with the raid, giving itself an additional attack when you, or giving something else an additional attack when you play it. Another card that's really interesting in this deck is Admiral Akbar. We are red-green Boba. Currently, I don't have Tarkin Town. You'll see why when you actually see the list at the end of the video. If we went to more copies in the final list of Akbar, you'd want to probably play Tarkin Town over a 30-point base. So that's something to consider. Echo-based Defender, Sentinel, and then buffing your other unit. If the opponent sort of gets a little bit mixed around with actions and doesn't necessarily trade right away, you can play Echo-based Defender to protect your unit and buff it, and then attack. So say you have the initiative, you play a Battlefield Marine, they play something like a Probe Droid, and then you ram your Echo-based Defender down. Sure, it's going to trade, but that Battlefield Marine will get in for 4, which is obviously a nice chunk of damage. So all of these cards have keywords. I'm on 3 copies of Red 3, 3 Peacekeepers, and 3 Echo-based Defenders. Right now I have 1 Akbar. I can see that number going up. He is pretty solid. One thing about Akbar 2 with the Restore 1, and then if he lives and then he gets buffed on the subsequent turns, it can kind of snowball with damage and healing. All right. So 2 cards to the right, K2 and Bright Hope, you know how strong they are. They both have keywords, so they're even stronger in this deck. K2 at times can sort of be an aggressive unit. You know it's going to attack or trade. It's going to do 3 damage when it dies. But now when you play it, it gives something else +1, so that's really strong. Bright Hope as well. One thing with Bright Hope is sometimes you actually want to trigger itself. So you don't necessarily get the push damage. But then if they want to maybe send a couple units into it, a couple space units, it's probably at 3 attack, it's actually going to kill something on the other side. So Bright Hope, really strong. Has really good synergy with R2 too, just drawing an extra card. So you guys all know, the powers of K2 and Bright Hope. But Modded Cohort is a new card, and it is incredibly powerful in this Boba deck. It can be a 5/4 with ambush on turn 4, so it can kill essentially everything on turn 3, the turn it comes out with 4 resources. So you're able to play it, use Boba's trigger to target itself, so then it becomes a 3/4 with Raid 2. So if you want to just wipe out a unit, go ahead. Another thing that you can do is you can actually use the Boba trigger on another unit. So let's say that they play something, and then you want to ambush right away and kill it. You've got another unit that maybe is now clear to attack their base for the extra damage. So really, really powerful card. And it's an interesting card on the subsequent turns as well. It kills a boss. It kills so many different units. And, it can wipe out little units and live. In the aggressive mirror, oftentimes we'd be using ECL. In like the Sabine command mirror, you'd use ECL to maybe make a profitable trade where your K2's going in. And now we have a card that does that sort of right away. So lots of really great benefits of Modded Cohort. It can kill. It's sort of a takedown to an extent where it can kill a 5 toughness unit just right off the bat. So really powerful cards at turn 3. And that's why I'm sort of saying good stuff. This deck is sort of playing a lot of sort of inherently singularly powerful cards with an additional trigger off of that Boba Fett. On turn 4, the payoffs continue. The Marauder is, another ambush card. So again, you're going to be able to ambush and trigger itself if you'd like to kill something with 5 toughness. Big unit. The when played ability with the ramping. There's a few synergies we'll see in this deck, but it's not something you're necessarily trying to do. We're essentially playing it as a 4/5 ambush in space. Poe Dameron has no abilities, but in my mind, the way the game's going to work, and this is the way I've designed it, is you're playing so much power early in the game with cards like Red 3, and cards that are sometimes hard to deal with. The Sundial guy, who's the 1/5 with Raid 2, Restore 2. So they're sort of strained to kill your things. You've got K2, you've got various other cards that they might be light, and then you're able to jam Poe, and they might not have an answer. And if they don't have an answer, Poe just sort of wins the game with his snowball impact. So I really like Poe in all colors, in all decks that can support his colors. So you're really just looking at high power level again. Now, which is important because unlike a Sabine deck or even a Boba deck, your leader is not coming out until the 6th resource turn. So you need to have these high power cards. You need to sort of be on top to stay in the mix against the aggro decks and to sort of still push the aggression against the control and more mid-range decks. You want to stay, you want to keep up. Turn 5 is obviously your leader turn. You know, Boba Fett as a unit leader, it's a nice unit. He's got a big body. He's able to push for 4. He's not really the enticing aspect of this deck. To me, the real enticing part is the front side, the pre-deploy. And then at this point, you've played all your really good units, and he can finish and push in a little bit more damage, maybe clean up a few units. And he's able to buff your leaders, your units that have keywords as well, which is the majority of your deck. If you flip him and you get an A-wing out, and all of a sudden that A-wing is hitting for 4. But for the most part, he's not exactly moving the needle a ton. In this color combination, I've said how much I enjoy Wrecker. I might have mentioned that on our Discord, but he's just such an powerful card, and all his abilities overwhelm. When he plays, you're not really holding back resources. So you're curving to 6, and then you're really kind of going off. One thing to note is you don't want to play Wrecker pre-flipping Boba Fett, because you won't be able to flip your Boba Fett. So there's some sort of tension there. You don't want to mess that up. But yeah, Wrecker, just a really powerful game-ending card. All right, let's talk a little bit about the synergy with this card, Timely Intervention. So because your units are so uniquely powerful, Timely Intervention is a card that has a lot of strength in this deck. From hand and also sort of late game when you just want a resource and you're searching through R2-D2 to get to like a Wrecker or a Poe or a K2. But I actually I don't just instantly put it in my resource row because there's times where on turn 5, playing it with Poe Dameron, if you're playing against a bounce deck, can really turn the tides in your favor. And, obviously with Wrecker, it has really good synergies if you're able to get to those turns later on. All your 4-drops that can be used with, you can use it with, red 3 or some of your other 3-drops on turn 4 if it's sequence as well. So having more opportunities to ambush is great. Oftentimes you're able to ambush and your ambushing unit is able to live. So just a lot of great synergy. Also, when you use it, you're able to trigger Boba Fett because now your unit has ambush. So your Boba Fett should trigger. I'm pretty sure that's the ruling. So just a lot of great synergy with Timely and your overpowered units as well. So we're the Beatdown deck. We are trying to push. So right now I've constructed it with a 30-point base, just basically to have more room to find our burn. So I am playing 4-cost, I believe, and this card does have some synergy with the 5-cost ship, milling and potentially ramping. It's not something you're really doing, but there's their synergy there. But really the end of the game, if you haven't been able to close the deal with your overpowered units, you're now able to play this pretty clever end game with 4-cost, timely reinforcements, or timely intervention, and sort of resourcing that card and then ambushing either a Wrecker or a Poe or a K2 to just to all those cards for the most part will do damage sort of on their own. So they're additional burn. And then R2-D2 is a card that sort of sifts and finds things. So you're putting cards in the bottom, you're milling cards with 4-cost, and you've got these really powerful payoffs that you're getting to. So unless you're playing against strict control and you haven't got there and they've hit their Avenger or their Reinforcement Walker, even if you've sort of passed the point of, okay, opponent stabilized, you've still got a lot of great ways to get those last points of damage in. So that brings us to a final list right here. I think I covered most of the cards. This list has one Agent Callus. I didn't want to go too heavy with anti-hero because we do play 4-cost, but Agent Callus can be sort of that extra ambush guy. That could be a second Admiral Akbar, in which case you probably want to shift to Tarkin Town. That's just meta dependent a bit. We do have Cobb in the sideboard. I know that's the card that I'm going to be looking to bring in against Control. outside of entrenched, he's great against almost all removal and sort of forces them to always be a card behind while you're able to push damage. So big fan of Cobb there in the sideboard against control. But yeah, here's the list, and set two's not finalized yet, so we'll be looking at new cards coming out. An exciting 2-drop with a keyword, really anything with keywords or any cards in these colors we're looking at including. But I will say this deck is tested well so far. It's got a lot of independently powerful cards that get buffed sort of inside the deck with Boba Fett and some other synergies as well, as we talked about. So I wanted to share that with you all today, and looking forward to set 2 premiere as we see some tournaments popping up in July. All right, take care, everybody.